Good morning, little masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and we are going to continue what we've been doing all the way since August here on Third Age Thursdays, looking at the poetry and songs from The Lord of the Rings. Last week, we strolled through the willow meads of Tisaranen as Treebeard told us about his first stage adventures in Beleriand. Today, we spend more time with the Ent as we look at the famous Song of the Ent and Entwife. Last week, on Middle-earth Map Monday, we spoke about the Brownlands, going back to Treebeard saying that the gardens of the Entwives are wasted. Men call them the Brownlands now. And it's right after that I'll pick up. I remember it was long ago, in the time of the war between Sauron and the Men of the Sea. Desire came over me to see Fimbrethil again. Very fair she was still in my eyes when I had last seen her, though little like the Ent maiden of old, for the Entwives were bent and browned by their labor, their hair parched by the sun to the hue of ripe corn, and their cheeks like red apples. Yet their eyes were still the eyes of our own people. We crossed over Anduin and came to their land, but we found a desert. It was all burned and uprooted, for war had passed over it. But the Entwives were not there. Long we called and long we searched, and we asked all folk that we met which way the Entwives had gone. Some said they had never seen them, and some said that they had seen them walking away west, and some said east, and others south. But nowhere that we went could we find them. Our sorrow was very great. Yet the wild wood called, and we returned to it. For many years we used to go out every now and again and look for the Entwives, walking far and wide and calling them by their beautiful names. But as time passed, we went more seldom and wandered less far, and now the Entwives are only a memory for us, and our beards are long and gray. The elves made many songs concerning the search of the Ents, and some of the songs passed into the tongues of men. But we made no songs about it, being content to chant their beautiful names when we thought of the Entwives. We believe that we may meet again in a time to come, and perhaps we shall find somewhere a land where we can live together and both be content. But it is foreboded that that will only be when we have both lost all that we now have. And it may well be that that time is drawing near at last, for if Sauron of old destroyed the gardens, the enemy today seems likely to wither all the woods. There was an Elvish song that spoke of this, or at least so I understand it. It used to be sung up and down the great river. It was never an Entish song, mark you. It would have been a very long song in Entish, but we know it by heart and hum it now and again. This is how it runs in your tongue. When spring unfolds the beechen leaf and sap is in the bough, when light is on the wildwood stream and wind is on the brow, when stride is long and breath is deep and keen the mountain air, come back to me, and say my land is fair. When spring is come to garth and field and corn is in the blade, when blossom like a shining snow is on the orchard laid, when shower and sun upon the earth with fragrance fill the air, I'll linger here and will not come, because my land is fair. When summer lies upon the world, and in a noon of gold, beneath the roof of sleeping leaves the dreams of trees unfold. When woodland halls are green and cool, and wind is in the west, come back to me, and say my land is best. When summer warms the hanging fruit and burns the berry brown, when straw is gold and ear is white and harvest comes to town, when honey spills and apple swells, though wind be in the west, I'll linger here beneath the sun, because my land is best. When winter comes, the winter wild that hill and wood shall slay, when trees shall fall and starless night devour the sunless day, when wind is in the deadly east, then in the bitter rain, I'll look for thee and call to thee, I'll come to thee again. When winter comes and singing ends, when darkness falls at last, when broken is the barren bough and light and labor past, I'll look for thee and wait for thee until we meet again. Together we will take the road beneath the bitter rain. And then both the Ent and Entwife sing the last stanza. Together we will take the road that leads into the west, and far away we'll find a land where both our hearts may rest. Treebeard ended his song. That is how it goes, he said. It is Elvish, of course, light-hearted, quick-worded, and soon over. I dare say it is fair enough, but the Ents could say more on their side if they had time. I'm sure they could. We don't have time, though, and neither does Treebeard. Now, going back to the beginning of this, Treebeard speaks of Fimbrethil, also known as Wandlim. But in his nomenclature, Tolkien explains Wandlim is not a translation of her Sindarin name. Instead, Fimbrethil, which is translated slightly differently in various sources, appears to mean slender beech, from Fim, slender, and Brethil, beech. But the Silmarillion says that Brethil means silver birch. And in Parma Eldalamberon 17, or else, Tolkien translates Fimbrethil as slim birch. So you can pick what you'd like there. Slim birch, silver birch, slender, slim, silver tree, I don't know. Something along those lines. As for the poem, once again, we see the passing of time via the seasons, albeit without autumn. That seems to just be missed. But what we really see is a strongly differing worldview between Ents and Entwives. The Ents love the great trees, the wild woods, the high hills, the elves. They love speaking with the trees and wandering. The Entwives love the smaller trees, right? The blossoming trees. They love meads and grasses. And they don't so much want to speak with these things as speak to them and have them obey. They like order and structure. Fangorn was a rolling stone. It seems like these two just can't get along because of their radical differences, but I feel like they're really just two sides of the same coin, and evidence that balance is something that both sides really ought to have sought after. At first glance, Treebeard seems to be demonstrating or revealing a stereotype, right? Men as wild and untamed, and women as domestic. Well, it turns out, no surprise here, that Corey Olsen thought of that way before I did. The Tolkien professor himself wrote an essay, The Myth of the Ent and the Entwife, and that was published in the Tolkien Studies Journal back in 2008. I highly recommend it if you have that. If you don't, try to find it online. It is available. I think it's available for pay. That's where I had to find it. But it's worth tracking down if you're interested in the subject. It's a fantastic essay. In it, he notes that same generalization, arguing that while its accuracy could be questioned, it is not merely a blind appeal to stereotypes. But interestingly, Corey adds that Tolkien's depiction of the Entish and Entwifely perspectives runs exactly counter to the traditional gender concepts that characterize the feminine as the passive principle and the masculine as the active. After all, he points out the Entwives are vigorously active, right? They're focused on being industrious and productive. The Ents are, and I love the way he says this, rather indolent by contrast. Yes, they are. But I love where he goes with this. In truth, there need be no competition between the active and contemplative perspectives. They are two different but valuable ways of celebrating natural beauty. And he calls their perspectives perfectly complementary. And I can't disagree. Folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow for First Age Friday as we wrap up the Lay of Lathian. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join the Content Council, get a bonus episode, and more. Podcast listeners, please subscribe to the TTT in your podcast apps. For those watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. You're going to get all the PPP productions, including the Prancing Pony Podcast, Rings of Power Wrap-Up, Today's Tolkien Times, and my new streaming project, The PPP Plays. And be sure you're following at Prancing Pony Pod on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and simply the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.